September 1940. The sky over the Libyan desert is a shade of blue that feels almost violent. There are no clouds, no birds, only the deafening roar of a Bristol Mercury engine. Inside that cramped cockpit, a young man, 6 feet 6 inches tall, 19 years of age, sits hunched over the controls of a Gloster Gladiator. His name is Roald Dahl. Yes, the same man who would one day give the world a chocolate factory and giant peaches, but right now, he is not a writer, he is a pilot for the Royal Air Force, and he is utterly, terrifyingly lost. Fate is often a hangman with a cruel sense of humor. Dahl had been given the wrong coordinates for his flight. He flew, and he flew, until the fuel needle kissed the 0 mark, and the sun began to slip behind the dunes. Then, the crash, a plume of orange fire in the middle of a desert graveyard. He survived, but his face was smashed, his skull was fractured, and for a long time, he was blind. That was the moment his reality shattered, making room for something else, something darker, something we call imagination, but he knew it for what it truly was, the debris of a broken mind. Take a look at the men sitting in the corner of any English pub tonight. The ones with the flat caps, the ones who stare a little too long into the amber depths of their ale. They are the ghosts of 1945. They returned to a country that wanted to forget, to a society that demanded a stiff upper lip, so they gave us exactly that. They gave us silence. In every brick cottage in the Cotswolds, in every terraced house in Manchester, a scene played out for decades. A grandfather sits at the Sunday roast, his grandchildren ask him, "Grandad, what was the war like?" He puts down his knife and fork, he looks out the window at the rain on the glass, and he says, "Oh, not much to tell, just a lot of mud and waiting." But he is lying. He is protecting them from the smell of cordite, the sound of a comrade screaming for his mother, the sight of a Messerschmitt diving out of the sun. He has locked those memories in a room, and he has thrown away the key. Roald Dahl found a different way. He did not lock the door, he turned the nightmares into stories. He took the monsters from the cockpit and the ghouls from the desert, and he hid them in plain sight, in books for our children. This is not a story about a famous author. This is a story about every British man who carried the weight of a world on his shoulders, and never spoke a word of the burden. This is about the price of the stiff upper lip. 1939. The mood in London was heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Young men queued up at recruitment offices, not out of hate, but out of a quiet, stubborn sense of duty. For a lad from a small village, the prospect of the Royal Air Force was a dream of blue silk and silver wings. They were told it was a noble pursuit, and perhaps it was, but the training was a brutal awakening. Day after day, hour after hour, learning to dance with death at 10,000 feet. Dahl was a natural, but nature has no mercy in a dogfight. When he finally reached his squadron in the Western Desert, he found a reality that no recruitment poster could describe. The heat was a physical weight, a constant, oppressive blanket that smelled of oil and sweat. The pilots lived in tents, they ate tinned rations, and they watched their friends disappear one by one into the haze. Every morning, they would climb into those machines, knowing that for some, it would be the last time they felt the earth beneath their feet. And when they returned, they didn't an appose, tea weep, they didn't an appose, tea scream, they went to the mess, they had a drink, they made a joke, and they prepared to do it all again tomorrow. That is the British way, is it not? To look into the abyss and remark that the weather is a bit grey. But the crash changed everything for Dahl. It wasn't an appose, tea just the physical pain, it was the visions. When he was blind in that hospital bed, the world inside his head became more vivid than the world outside. He began to see the gremlins, those mischievous little creatures that pilots blamed for engine failures. To others, they were just a myth, a bit of fun to pass the time. To Dahl, they were a manifestation of the chaos, the sheer, unpredictable randomness of war. He realized that a single bolt, a single wire, a single mistake by a mechanic back in Blighty could mean the difference between life and death. The universe wasn't an appose, tea governed by logic, it was governed by whim. He returned to the sky, incredibly. He fought in the Battle of Athens, 5 British Hurricanes against 80 German bombers and fighters. It wasn't an TA battle, it was a massacre. He described it as a blur of traces and burning metal, a kaleidoscope of terror. He survived that too, but the headaches began. The blinding, searing pain that made it impossible to fly. He was sent home as the hero on paper, but a man possessed by the things he had seen. He went to Washington, he became a spy, he rubbed shoulders with presidents and movie stars, but he was always the outsider. The Englishman who knew too much. He started to write, first about the war, but then, the darkness began to leak into everything else. Have you ever really read his stories, truly looked at them? They are not sweet, they are not kind. They are filled with cruel adults, grotesque punishments, and a sense that at any moment, the floor could drop away beneath you. The twits. The witches. Tales of the unexpected. These were his way of screaming without making a sound. He was telling us that the world is a dangerous, strange, and often unfair place. He was telling us what he learned in the skies over Greece and the sands of Libya. But what of the others? What of the millions who didn't and have a pen, who didn't and have a platform? Think of the men who came back from the Burma Campaign. The forgotten army. They fought in jungles so thick they couldn't and see their own hands. They faced an enemy that did not believe in surrender. They endured diseases that rotted their skin. And when they came home, the war in Europe was already over. The parties had finished, the bunting was tattered. People asked, "Where have you been?" And they would say, "Oh, out east," and that was the end of it. They went back to their jobs at the post office, the bank, the factory. They married their sweethearts, they raised children who never knew that their father had held a dying man in his arms in a monsoon rain. They suffered in the early hours of the morning, waking up in a cold sweat, smelling the damp earth of a trench, but when their wives asked, "What is it, dear?" they would say, "Just a bad dream, go back to sleep." This was the pact. The nation would provide a pension, a medal, and a house, and in exchange, the men would provide the silence. We called it recovery, but it was actually a burial. We see it in the art of that time, either movies, the comedy. Look at Spike Milligan, a man who redefined British humor with The Goon Show. He was a gunner in the Royal Artillery. He was blown up in Italy. He suffered a breakdown that lasted the rest of his life. His comedy was a riot of nonsense, a rebellion against the order and the logic that had led to the slaughter. He made us laugh so we wouldn't and have to hear the echo of the shells. He was a man fighting a war that never ended, and his weapon was a punchline. Or Alec Guinness, the great actor. He commanded a landing craft on D-Day. He saw the chaos of the beaches, the sheer, messy reality of the invasion. He spent his career wearing masks, becoming other people, because perhaps, being himself was too heavy a burden. Every one of them carried a piece of the 1940s with them, like a shrapnel fragment lodged too close to the heart to be removed. And now, they are almost all gone. The last of the generation that saved us. When the final veteran passes away, we will lose more than just a person, we will lose a witness. The history books can tell us the dates, the names of the generals, the movement of the divisions, but they cannot tell us the weight of the silence at the dinner table. They cannot tell us how it felt to walk down a street in London after the Blitz, seeing a gap in the houses like a missing tooth, knowing that your neighbors were still under the rubble. We must hold on to these stories. Even the ones they didn't and want to tell, especially the ones they didn't and want to tell. We must look at the poppies we wear every November and see more than just a flower. We must see the blood of the boys who never grew old, and the tears of the men who did. Roald Dahl once wrote, "I began to realize how important it was to be an enthusiast in life. If you are interested in something, no matter what it is, go at it at full speed ahead. Embrace it with both arms, hug it, love it, and above all become passionate about it. Lukewarm is no good." Perhaps that was his ultimate victory over the war. To choose passion over despair. To choose the extraordinary over the mundane. to take the grey reality of a bombed-out world and paint it in the brightest, most terrifying colours imaginable. He didn't and appos, just write for children. He wrote for the child he used to be, the one who believed in heroes, before he found out that heroes are just ordinary men forced to do impossible things. So, next time you see a veteran, or a photo of a young man in a flight suit, don and appos, just think of the victory. Think of the cost. Think of the nights in the desert, the fear in the cockpit, and the long, quiet years that followed. The stiff upper lip was a shield, but behind it, there was a human heart, beating with the rhythm of 1,000 untold stories. It is up to us to listen, even if they are no longer speaking. Imagine a Sunday afternoon in an English suburb, 1955. The war has been over for 10 years. The ration books are gone, the television is a new, flickering miracle in the corner of the lounge. A man stands in his garden, he is trimming the hedge. He is meticulous, every leaf must be in its place. He wears a knitted cardigan, he smokes a pipe, he looks like the very definition of stability. His neighbor calls out, "Morning, Arthur, lovely day for it." Arthur nods, he smiles. Yes, grand, simply grand. But in Arthur and Appos' mind, the hedge is not a hedge, it is the perimeter of an airfield in Kent. He is listening for the sound of the scramble bell. He is checking the horizon for the black dots of the Luftwaffe. He spent 3 years in a prisoner of war camp in Germany. He survived on turnip soup and hope. He saw things that made him question the existence of God, but he never mentioned it to his wife, Mavis. She knows, of course. She knows why he won an Appos, go to the cinema if the film is too loud. She knows why he always sits with his back to the wall in a restaurant. She knows, but she doesn't an Appos, ask, because in 1950s Britain, you didn't an Appos, ask. You carried on. You made do. You mended. This was the architecture of our society, a vastly intricate network of secrets kept out of love. A generation of women who held their families together while their husbands wandered through the ruins of their own minds. We talk about the greatest generation, and they were, but they were also the most traumatized. Roald Dahl's tales of the unexpected always started with a silhouette, a man sitting in an armchair, a plume of smoke rising from his cigarette. He looked calm, he looked in control, but the story that followed was always a descent into madness, a twist that left you reeling. That was his metaphor for the British life. The calm exterior, the armchair, the pipe, and the utter, terrifying unpredictability lurking just beneath the surface. In his story, the landlady, a young man stays at a quaint bed and breakfast. The landlady is a sweet, elderly woman, but she has a hobby, she taxidermies her guests. It is a horror story, but it is also a reflection of the war. The idea that the person across from you, the one offering you a cup of tea, might be harboring a darkness you cannot imagine. Dahl knew that darkness because he had been a part of it. He had been a spy for MI6. He had manipulated people, he had played the game of shadows. He had learned that truth is the first casualty of war, and often, it never recovers. Think of the men who worked at Bletchley Park, the code breakers. They were sworn to secrecy for 30 years. They went home after the war and told their parents they had been clerks. They watched as the world moved on, never knowing that they had shortened the war by years, never knowing that they were the architects of the modern age. They lived in the silence because they had to, but also because they didn't and Appos, know how to exist outside of it. There is a weight to that kind of secrecy. It shapes a person, it makes them distant, a little cold. We grew up thinking our grandfathers were stern, unemotional. We didn't and Appos, realized they were just keeping a lid on a boiling pot. Remembrance Sunday is a uniquely British ritual. The silence at 11 a.m., the slow march of the veterans, the wreaths of red poppies. It is a beautiful thing, but it is also a sanitized thing. We see the medals, we see the uniforms, we hear the military bands, but we don and Appos, see the psychiatric wards, we don and Appos, TC the alcoholism, we don and appos, TC the broken marriages. We don and appos, TC the man who couldn't and appos, T hold a job because the sound of a steam whistle reminded him of a falling bomb. Dahl's work for children is often criticized for being too dark, but perhaps he was the most honest writer we had. He didn't an appos, T lied to the kids. He didn't an appos, T tell them the world was a safe place where the good always win. He told them that there are giants who eat people, that there are witches who hate children, but he also told them that you can win, if you are clever, if you are brave, and if you have a little bit of magic on your side. He gave them the tools to face the monsters, because he had faced them himself. He lived his later years in a house called Gypsy House in Great Missenden. He wrote in a small hut at the bottom of the garden. He sat in an old wingback chair, he had a board on his lap, he wrote in pencil on yellow legal pads. He surrounded himself with oddities, a piece of his own hip bone that had been removed, a ball of silver foil made from chocolate wrappers, the engine of a model plane. He created a sanctuary, a world where he was the master of the narrative, where he could control the twists and the turns, where he could make the bad people lose. It was a far cry from the cockpit of that gladiator, spinning out of control over the desert. But he never forgot the desert. He once said, "An autobiography is a book a person writes about his own life, and it is usually full of all sorts of boring details. This is not an autobiography." He was right. His life was a myth, a legend, a tragedy, and a triumph, all rolled into one. And in that, he was the ultimate British man. We are a nation of storytellers, because we have so much we cannot say. We are a nation of gardeners, because we need to feel life growing in our hands after seeing so much death. We are a nation of pub goers, because we need the company of others to drown out the sound of our own thoughts. As we move further away from 1945, the memories fade, the stories are lost. The man in the flat cap at the end of the bar takes his secret to the grave. The house with the missing tooth is replaced by a modern office block. The hut in the garden becomes a museum. But the spirit remains. It is in the way we handle a crisis, with a quiet, determined, almost bored efficiency. It is in our humor, the dry, dark wit that finds the funny in the macabre. It is in our refusal to be defeated, even when the odds are 80-5. Roald Dahl left us a legacy of wonder, but he also left us a warning. Do not be fooled by the armchair, do not be fooled by the pipe, and do not be fooled by the silence. Behind every British man is a history, a struggle, and a story that is waiting for someone to ask the right question. So ask. Ask your fathers, ask your grandfathers, ask the men in your lives about the things they have seen. They might not tell you everything, they might not tell you anything at all, but let them know that you are ready to listen. Let them know that the silence is no longer required. Lest we forget, not just the soldiers, but the men they had to become to survive. 1990. Gypsy House is quiet. The pencils are still, the yellow pads are blank. Roald Dahl has left the hut for the last time. He was 84 years old. He had lived 1,000 lives, he had died 1,000 deaths. He left behind a world that was a little bit more magical, and a lot more honest, because of him. He was a pilot, a spy, a father, a writer, and a survivor. He was the man who turned the tragedy of war into the triumph of the imagination. And in the end, that is the greatest story of them all. Imagine, if you will, a small village in the heart of England. The year is 1944. The war is over, but the victory feels hollow. The men come back to a world they no longer recognize, and they find that they no longer recognize themselves. They stand at the bar of the local pub, the George and Dragon. They drink their pints in silence. The radio in the corner plays a dance tune, but they are listening to the rhythm of the anti-aircraft guns. One man, let an appos, call him Jack, looks at his hands. They are shaking. He was a medic, he saw things that no man should ever see. He tried to save a boy who was no older than his own younger brother. The boy died in the mud of Normandy, and Jack still feels the heat of his blood on his palms. He goes home to his wife, Rose. She has dinner on the table. She has kept the house clean, she has kept the children fed. She looks at him with eyes that are full of love, and a question she is afraid to ask. Jack sits down, he eats, he says the potatoes are good. Rose smiles, she says she got them from the allotment. That is the extent of their conversation. The war is a wall between them, a glass screen that they can see through, but never touch. Jack spends his Saturdays at the allotment, digging, planting, weeding. He finds peace in the soil. He likes the way it smells, clean and honest. He doesn't tell anyone that he is digging a grave for his memories. This is the hidden history of Britain. The history of the allotment and the pub, the history of the garden and the tea room. It is a history of survival. Roald Dahl once wrote, "I am a great believer in the fact that the only way to survive is to be a bit of a rebel." Maybe that was his greatest rebellion. To refuse to be silent. To refuse to let the war win. He took the Gremlins and he made them famous. He took the landlady and he made her a legend. He took the darkness and he made it art. He showed us that Chan Thuong Dasan and Appos, tea have to be a dead end, it can be a beginning. But for every Dahl, there were a million Jacks and men who lived and died in the silence. We owe it to them to break the pact. We owe it to them to look at the history of our country with clear eyes, to see the pain as well as the glory. We are a nation built on the backs of men who did in an Appos, tea complain, who did in an Appos, tea cry, and who did in an Appos, tea ask for help. But that doesn't an Appos, tea mean they did in an Appos, tea need it. As the sun sets over Great Missenden, and the shadows grow long in the garden of Gypsy House, think of the man in the hut. Think of the pilot in the desert. Think of the boy who wanted to be a hero, and the man who became a storyteller instead. The world is a strange place, a terrifying place, a wonderful place. And the stories are the only map we have. So, tell your story. Listen to theirs. Because in the end, the silence is the only thing we should truly fear. Remember the men of the Royal Air Force, the ones who flew into the sun. Remember the men of the Royal Navy, the ones who braved the cold grey Atlantic. Remember the men of the British Army, the ones who fought through the mud and the fire. But most of all, remember the men they were when the guns fell silent. The ones who came home, and sat at our tables, and loved us, and never told us why they were afraid of the dark. Remembrance is not just for the dead, it is for the living. It is for the survivors who carried the ghosts of their friends for 50 years. It is for the grandfathers who never told us about the war, because they wanted us to grow up in a world where war was just a story. Lest we forget the men behind the stiff upper lip. Lest we forget the human heart, beating in the silence. The story of Roald Dahl is a British story. It is a story of grit, of imagination, and of a quiet, stubborn refusal to be broken. It is a story for all of us. So, have a drink tonight, raise a glass to the men in the flat caps, to the pilots in the sky, and to the storytellers who keep the truth alive. Even when it's hidden in a book for children. The air is getting cold now, the pub is closing its doors. The lights in the cottages are going out one by one. But the silence is different now. It is not a burial, it is a memory. And memories, like stories, never truly die. They are just waiting for someone to tell them. 1990. The end of a life, the beginning of a legacy. Good night. Roald. Good night. Jack. Good night. Blighty. We remember. We always remember. And the stories, they go on, and on, and on, into the unexpected. In every village hall, where the names are carved in stone, in every churchyard where the grass grows long over the white crosses, there is a quiet power. It is the power of a promise kept. They did their duty, they came home, they built a new world, and they left the old one behind. But the old world is still there, in the eyes of the man looking out the window. It is in the way he pauses before he answers a question. It is in the way he holds his grandson and Appos' hand a little too tightly. He is anchored to a time we can only imagine, a time of steel and fire, a time of great loss and greater courage. We are his grandchildren, the beneficiaries of his silence. We live in the light because he endured the darkness. So, when we talk about the war, let an Apos talk about the men. Not the uniforms, not the tanks, not the planes, but the men. The ones who were afraid, and did it anyway. The ones who were broken, and mended themselves as best they could. The ones who took the nightmares of their youth and turned them into the dreams of our childhood. That is the true history of Great Britain. A history of people who found a way to carry on. No matter what. No matter how hard. No matter how silent. We are a nation of survivors. And we have the stories to prove it. Even the ones we haven't and Apos told yet. So, let the silence be a tribute. But let the stories be the bridge. Between the world they saved, and the world we live in now. Remembrance Sunday, 2020 Bonn. The poppies are red, the sky is blue, and the silence is full of voices. If you listen closely, you can hear them. The pilots, the soldiers, the sailors. The ones who didn't and Apos come back, and the ones who did. They are all there in the quiet, waiting to be remembered. Not as legends, but as men. Ordinary men who did the extraordinary. And then came home and had a cup of tea. Lest we forget. Lest we ever forget. The end of the beginning. And the story goes on. Always. In every heart. In every home. In every word we write. And every silence we hold. Britain remembers. We remember. Forever. And ever. Amen.